The void stretched endlessly, illuminated only by the faint glimmers of distant stars and the swirling, prismatic clouds of the Peridas Expanse. The Expanse was a place of fear and myth, a galactic dead zone where hundreds of ships had vanished without a trace. And yet, it was here that Captain Lira Veylan's ship, the Ecliptic Thorn, hovered at the edge of the abyss, drawn by a signal no one else had dared to answer. "Are we seriously going in there?" asked Ryan Dax, the ship's weapons specialist. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his sharp, angular features reflecting skepticism. "Because I've heard stories about this place, Captain. Bad ones." Lira didn't look away from the command console, her piercing amber eyes scanning the readings. The signal pulsing from the depths of the Expanse wasn't just a random echo. It was directed, deliberate, a cry for help in a frequency that shouldn't have existed. "We're not here to debate ghost stories," she said coolly. "Whatever is out there, someone or something sent that signal, and we're the only ones answering." "And maybe for good reason," Ryan muttered, earning a sharp glance from Lira. Across the bridge, K.L. Reese, the ship's navigator, cleared his throat nervously. "Captain, the Peridas Expanse has anomalies, spatial rifts, electromagnetic storms, gravity wells that don't obey the usual rules. If we enter, navigation will be, let's just say, challenging." "Challenging is what we're good at," Lira replied, her tone resolute. She turned to Dahlia Iren, the ship's science officer, who was staring intently at a hollow projection of the Expanse. The luminous tendrils of energy within the nebula seemed to shift unnaturally, as though aware of their presence. "Dahlia, what do you make of it?" Lira asked. Dahlia hesitated before answering, her voice tinged with unease. "The signal, it's old, older than the Galactic Archive's recorded history. But what's strange is how deliberate it feels. It's not a distress beacon, it's more like an invitation." "An invitation to what?" Ryan asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "That's what we're going to find out," Lira said, rising from her seat. "Prepare the ship for entry, full power to the shields, and recalibrate the nav systems to compensate for spatial distortion." Kyle hesitated, his hand hovering over the controls. "Captain, if we go in, there's no guarantee we'll come out." Lira's gaze didn't waver. "Then let's make it count." As the Ecliptic Thorn advanced into the swirling depths of the Peridas Expanse, the ship's lights flickered. The hum of the engines grew uneven, and the holographic displays warped, struggling to process the data pouring in. Outside the viewport, the vibrant colors of the nebula twisted and writhed, as though alive. Ryan tensed in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests. "Tell me this is normal." "It's not," Dahlia said bluntly, her eyes fixed on the readings. "The Expanse's electromagnetic field is reacting to us. It's almost like it knows we're here." Suddenly, the signal spiked, flooding the comm systems with a distorted voice. The words were garbled, ancient, but there was an undeniable urgency in the tone. "What are they saying?" Lira asked, her voice calm but firm. Dahlia frantically adjusted the console. "I'm isolating the audio. Give me a moment." The ship shuddered violently, throwing the crew forward. Alarms blared, and KL struggled to stabilize their trajectory. "We've got a gravity anomaly pulling us in. I'm trying to compensate." "Shields holding at 60%, Rian reported, his voice sharp. "We need to get out of this before—" A sudden burst of light filled the bridge as the ship was yanked through a spatial rift. The view outside the viewport shifted in an instant. The chaotic colors of the nebula were gone, replaced by a vast open space, a void unlike anything they'd seen before. In the distance, a colossal structure floated silently, its design ancient and incomprehensible. It shimmered faintly, its surface covered in glowing glyphs that pulsed in time with the signal. "What the hell is that?" Rian whispered, his usual bravado stripped away. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she took in the sight. "The source of the signal." Before anyone could respond, the comm system crackled to life. A voice, now clear and commanding, echoed through the bridge. It spoke in a language that seemed both alien and familiar, resonating in their minds. "You have answered the call. Prove you are worthy to cross the veil." As the words faded, the massive structure began to shift. Panels unfolded, revealing a labyrinth of interlocking pathways. At its center, a glowing portal flickered to life, beckoning them forward. "We're not alone," Dahlia said quietly, pointing to the scanners. Faint blips appeared around the structure. Other ships, some clearly derelict, others still active but eerily silent. "Looks like we've got company," Ryan muttered. Lyra's jaw tightened. "Prepare to board. Whatever this is, it's bigger than us, and we're going to find out why." The threshold of the unknown, the Ecliptic Thorn, drifted closer to the colossal structure, the faint hum of its engines a whisper against the overwhelming silence of the void. The labyrinthine design of the ancient construct seemed almost deliberate, as though it were testing their resolve. Around them, the derelict husks of other ships floated aimlessly, some torn apart, others eerily intact. They were reminders of the peril that awaited anyone foolish or brave enough to approach. "This is insane," Ryan muttered, staring out at the scattered wreckage. "Look at them. Those ships weren't just destroyed. They were gutted. Whatever's here doesn't want visitors." Lyra stood at the command console, her expression unreadable. "Or maybe it's what's left behind when visitors fail," she said, her tone clipped. She turned to Dahlia. "What do we know about those ships? Are there any life signs?" Dahlia's fingers danced across her console. The screen flickered with data as she scanned the surrounding area. "No life signs," she confirmed, her voice uneasy. "But their power cores are still active. It's almost like they've been preserved." "Preserved for what?" Kyle asked, his voice hushed. The navigator rarely spoke up during moments like these, but even he couldn't suppress the unease curling in his gut. "Maybe we're about to find out," Rian said dryly, though his hand hovered close to his sidearm. The comm system crackled again, and the voice that had summoned them earlier echoed through the ship. "Enter the labyrinth. Only those who prove themselves may cross the veil." As the words faded, the glowing portal at the center of the structure pulsed brightly, and a narrow docking corridor extended toward their ship like a living tendril. It locked onto their hull with a metallic clang, and the entire ship shuddered. "Looks like we've been invited," Lira said, strapping on her tactical belt. Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a tension that wasn't lost on the crew. "Gear up, we're going in." "Great," Rian muttered as he grabbed his rifle. "Because walking into an alien death maze is definitely how I imagined this day going." The crew assembled in the airlock, their movements brisk and efficient despite the mounting tension. Lyra took the lead, her amber eyes sharp and focused. Behind her, Rian and Dahlia checked their equipment while Kyle brought up the rear, clutching a portable nav scanner. As the airlock cycled open, a rush of stale, cold air greeted them. The docking corridor was dimly lit, its walls smooth and seamless, as though carved from a single piece of metal. Strange glyphs glowed faintly along the surface, pulsing in rhythm with the portal's energy. "Stay close," Lyra ordered, stepping into the corridor. "We don't know what's waiting for us." The corridor led them into the heart of the structure where the labyrinth began. The walls rose impossibly high, shimmering faintly as if alive. Pathways branched out in every direction, some twisting upward, others spiraling downward into shadow. The air was thick with a faint hum vibrating in their bones. Kyle paused, his scanner flickering erratically. "This place is messing with the readings. The pathways keep shifting, like it's alive." "It probably is," Dahlia said quietly, her gaze fixed on the glyphs. "These symbols, they're not just decorations. They're part of the structure, like a nervous system. I think they're responding to us." "Perfect," Rian said, his grip tightening on his rifle. "An alien maze with a mind of its own. What could possibly go wrong?" As if in answer, a deep, resonant sound echoed through the labyrinth. It wasn't mechanical, nor was it natural. It was something in between, a low, throbbing pulse that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "What was that?" Kyle whispered, his voice trembling. "Something's waking up," Lira said grimly. "We need to move." The crew pressed on, navigating the shifting pathways with growing urgency. The glyphs along the walls grew brighter, casting eerie shadows that seemed to follow their movements. The hum of energy grew louder, and the air grew heavier, pressing against them like an invisible force. They reached a wide chamber, its walls lined with massive crystalline spires that pulsed with light. At the center stood a pedestal, upon which a small, glowing object floated. A shard of some kind, its surface etched with the same glyphs that adorned the walls. "Is that—" Dahlia began, her voice trailing off. Before she could finish, the hum shifted, and the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. From the shadows, dark shapes emerged, humanoid figures, but twisted and distorted, their bodies wreathed in black, shimmering energy. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as though they were marionettes controlled by an unseen hand. "Contacts!" Ryan barked, raising his rifle. "We've got hostiles!" Lira drew her weapon, her gaze fixed on the approaching figures. "Hold your ground. Protect that shard." The figures advanced, their movements unnervingly silent. The crew braced for battle, their weapons trained on the enemy. And as the first shots rang out, Lira couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The first wave came fast, too fast. Ryan's rifle blazed, each plasma burst cutting through the dim chamber, but the figures barely faltered. They moved with a predatory grace, their blackened forms shimmering as if composed of liquid shadow. His shots connected, briefly splintering the energy around their limbs, but the creatures kept coming. "These things don't go down easy," Ryan shouted, backpedaling toward the pedestal. Lira fired her sidearm in quick succession, her shots precise. The glowing rounds briefly illuminated the creatures' forms, revealing skeletal frames encased in pulsing energy, almost like an armor. "Focus on the joints," she ordered. "Target the weak points." Kael crouched near the pedestal, his nav scanner now nothing more than dead weight in his hand. The shifting energy of the labyrinth had rendered it useless. "I don't think these things are trying to kill us," he said, his voice shaking. "They're trying to keep us away from the shard." "Well, they're doing a great job of it," Dahlia snapped. Her portable energy shield flickered to life in front of her, deflecting an arcing swipe from one of the creatures. The impact sent vibrations through her arms, but she held firm. "These things are strong, but they're not invincible." Lira made a split-second decision. "Rian, Dahlia, keep them off us. Kael, help me with the shard." "You want me to touch that thing?" Kael asked, incredulous. "Unless you've got a better idea," Lira snapped. "Yes." Kael hesitated, but then darted toward the pedestal. The shard floated mere inches above its surface, glowing faintly but pulsing in rhythm with the glyphs on the walls. It seemed to call out, not with words, but with a subtle vibration that resonated in his chest. "Careful," Lira warned, her eyes never leaving the advancing figures. "We don't know what it'll do." Kyle reached out, his hand trembling as it neared the shard. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a shockwave of light burst outward, throwing him backward. He hit the ground hard, his vision swimming as a sharp, high-pitched sound filled the air. The creatures paused, their movements suddenly erratic. They twitched violently, their forms flickering like unstable holograms. For a brief moment, the room was silent, save for the shard's pulsating hum, now louder and more insistent. "What the hell just happened?" Rian demanded, his rifle still trained on the disoriented figures. Kael groaned as he pushed himself up. I think I activated something." "You think?" Ryan retorted. "You just pissed them off even more." But Lira wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the shard, which now hovered higher above the pedestal, its light intensifying. The glyphs on the walls shifted, forming new patterns, and the chamber itself seemed to ripple. "This isn't just a shard," Lira said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "It's a key." "A key to what?" Dahlia asked, deflecting another attack with her shield. Her breaths came in short bursts, the strain of holding the line evident. Before Lira could answer, the glyphs glowed brighter, and a deep, resonant sound filled the chamber. The creatures froze, their forms dissolving into the floor as though pulled by an unseen force. The oppressive energy in the room lessened, but the sense of unease remained. "I don't like this," Ryan muttered, lowering his weapon but keeping it ready. "It's too quiet." The pedestal began to lower, revealing a hidden staircase spiraling downward into the void. The shard floated above it as if beckoning them to follow. "Of course," Kyle said, staring at the dark descent. "Because nothing says safe like a glowing key and a staircase into oblivion." Lyra stepped forward, her hand gripping the shard. This time, it didn't react violently. Instead, it pulsed gently in her grasp as though recognizing her touch. "We came here for answers," she said firmly, looking back at the team. "And they're down there. If anyone wants to stay behind, now's your chance." Ryan scoffed. "Not a chance. You just get yourself killed without me." Dahlia smirked despite the tension. "Someone's got to keep you both alive." Kyle sighed, slinging his scanner over his shoulder. "Let's get this over with." The team descended the staircase, the walls around them glowing faintly with the same glyphs. The air grew colder, and the hum of energy deepened into a low vibration that seemed to come from the very fabric of the labyrinth. As they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a vast chamber. At its center was an enormous crystalline structure, an orb suspended by thick tendrils of light. It pulsed with the same energy as the shard, and inside its translucent surface, swirling patterns of light and shadow danced like a living galaxy. "This is it," Lira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is what the shard led us to." Kael approached cautiously, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. "What is it?" Dahlia scanned the structure, her console beeping erratically. "It's some kind of energy core, but it's alive. It's generating its own bioelectric field." The shard in Lyra's hand pulsed, and the glyphs on the orb began to shift. A low voice filled the chamber, neither mechanical nor organic, but something in between. "You have awakened the Veil's guardian. The path forward will test your resolve. Step forward or turn back." The ground beneath them trembled, and a faint glow appeared on the far side of the chamber, revealing another portal. Beyond it, shadows moved, larger and more menacing than anything they had encountered so far. Lyra tightened her grip on the shard. "We step forward," she said, her voice steady. "We find the truth." As they approached the portal, the shadows beyond it began to stir, their forms becoming clearer. They weren't just obstacles, they were something far worse. The portal flared as the team approached, its edges rippling with energy that radiated both menace and mystery. Beyond it, the shadowed figures grew clearer, massive, jagged forms that seemed to defy natural anatomy. Their limbs twisted in ways that suggested an intelligence far more complex and sinister than anything they had faced before. They didn't just stand, they loomed, pulsating faintly as if feeding on the energy of the portal itself. "We're walking into a death trap," Ryan muttered, tightening his grip on his weapon. His bravado from earlier was now replaced with quiet focus. "Are we sure this is the only way?" Lyra turned, her eyes fierce but calm. The shard in her hand pulsed like a heartbeat, its rhythm steadying her resolve. "It's not about certainty," she said. "It's about necessity. Whatever's beyond this portal, it's tied to the Veil and to the answers we came here for." Kael groaned, glancing nervously at the portal. "Remind me again why we decided to follow a glowing key into an ancient death labyrinth." "Because you're terrible at saying no," Dahlia quipped, her shield generator humming softly as she prepared for the inevitable. "And because, deep down, you know this is bigger than all of us." The shard pulsed again, brighter this time, as if urging them forward. The portal seemed to respond, its glow intensifying and casting eerie shadows on the chamber walls. "No time for second thoughts," Lyra said, stepping through the portal without hesitation. The rest of the team exchanged quick glances before following. On the other side, the world shifted. They emerged into what could only be described as a battlefield frozen in time. Vast, crumbling structures loomed in the distance, their architecture impossibly alien. The sky above was a swirling vortex of colors, each hue bleeding into the next in an unsettling dance. But what captured their attention was the ground beneath their feet. It wasn't solid. It moved, rippling like liquid glass, reflecting the fractured memories of 1,000 battles. Rian crouched, touching the surface cautiously. "It's alive," he whispered, pulling his hand back quickly as the ground seemed to recoil from his touch. "No, it's resonant," Vera corrected, scanning the area. "It's reacting to us, but it's not organic. This entire place is like a memory built from energy." In the distance, the jagged shadow forms began to move. Slowly at first, their lumbering steps echoing like distant thunder, but with each passing second, their speed increased. "They've noticed us," Dahlia said grimly, raising her shield. "And they don't look friendly." "They're not just guardians," Lira said, her voice tight. "They're part of the Veil itself, defenders of whatever secret it's hiding." "Fantastic," Ryan muttered. "So how do we stop them?" Before Lira could answer, the shard pulsed violently in her hand, sending a shockwave through the air. The shadows halted briefly, their forms flickering as though disrupted. The shard pulsed again, this time sending a tendril of light toward the largest of the creatures. The tendril struck it squarely, and for a brief moment, the shadow dissolved, revealing what lay beneath. The creature's core was crystalline, similar to the shard but larger and fractured. It pulsed erratically, its energy unstable. The shard in Lyra's hand pulsed in response, as if calling to the core. "That's it," Lira said, her eyes widening. "The shard, it's connected to them. It's their anchor." "Anchor or weakness?" Rian asked, already taking aim. "Because if it's the latter, I'm taking the shot." "No!" Lira shouted, stopping him. "We don't destroy it. Not yet. If the shard is linked to the Veil, destroying it might collapse everything, including us." Kale groaned, backing up as one of the smaller creatures advanced. "So what do we do? Talk it into submission?" "No," Lira said, her voice resolute. "We stabilize it." "Stabilize it," Ryan barked. "Are you listening to yourself right now?" "We have no choice," Lira snapped. "If we destroy these cores, the entire Veil could unravel. But if we stabilize them, we might be able to shut this whole place down without bringing it all crashing down on our heads." Another pulse from the shard sent the shadows retreating slightly, as if uncertain. Lira took the chance to step forward, holding the shard high. The glyphs on its surface glowed brighter, casting intricate patterns onto the crystalline ground. "Cover me," she ordered. "This is going to take time." Dahlia and Ryan moved into position, forming a defensive line as the shadows regrouped and began their advance once more. The creatures seemed agitated now, their forms shifting more erratically. "Time isn't exactly on our side, Lira," Dahlia said, deflecting a swipe from one of the smaller shadows. "Whatever you're doing, do it fast." Kael knelt beside Lira, his scanner now synced to the shard. "The shard's energy signature is syncing with the core," he said, his voice laced with urgency. "But it's unstable. You need to modulate the frequency." "How?" Lira demanded, sweat beading on her brow as she struggled to control the shard's pulsing light. "Trust your instincts," Kael said. "This thing is responding to you, just—" A deafening roar cut him off as one of the larger shadows lunged toward them. Rian intercepted it with a well-placed plasma grenade, the explosion sending the creature sprawling but not stopping it entirely. "Time's up," Rian shouted. "They're closing in." The shard flared brightly, and for a moment, the entire battlefield froze. The shadows halted mid-motion, their forms flickering violently. Lira gritted her teeth, pouring her focus into the shard. "I'm almost there!" The ground beneath them began to crack, light spilling through the fractures. The shard's energy surged, and the crystalline cores within the shadows began to glow brighter. The Veil was shifting again, and the next phase of its test was about to begin.